Hello, BookTube. A couple of days from now, in the most accurate forecast models, there is supposed to be a dip in temperature for about 12 hours here in Boston, where it's going to go from mid 50s, low 60s Fahrenheit, which it has been for the last 200 years, to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe even below 0 Fahrenheit, for about 12 hours. So just when you're starting to say this is a little uncomfortable, the temperature is going to go back up into the mid 50s. But the fact that that dip in temperature is on the horizon and may happen, some models are saying that it won't, but it may happen for 12 hours, I viewed as sufficient reason to go to the Brattle Bookshop. I viewed that as my excuse to go to the Brattle Bookshop and buy a bunch of books. So I did that first thing this morning. I had a few subway adventures, but I got there and I got back in one piece. And it was a blast, as the Brattle always is. Those of you who are new to the channel, the Brattle is a used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston on a side street. They have 3 stories of jam-packed with books of every kind except romance. And they also have a sale lot next door. The lot next to the shop is open and is full of carts on the walls, on wheels, that are full of books, thousands and thousands more books for $1, $3, or $5 a piece. I spent a lot of time out in the Brattle sale lot. I spent a lot of time out there, even this morning when it was pretty cold out there. I've been out there in all kinds of weathers. The Brattle carts are tarped over when it's precipitating, but otherwise you take your chances. For instance, during that upcoming day, there's a day upcoming, I think it's supposed to be Saturday, where I doubt that the daytime high temperature will reach 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Which is pretty brutal to stand out in the lot in that weather. And you have to spend time out there. You can't just glance at it because it's not set up in any kind of way except by price. So you can't look at 10 carts and say, oh, that's all fiction, so I won't look at that. It's a blissful experience to browse those carts leisurely on a beautiful day when you have no other calls on your time. There is, for a bookish person, scarcely a better way to spend 2 hours on a beautiful afternoon. But I won't be going there when it's single digits cold. I have plenty of books here. I don't need them that bad. But I got a stack of books, and I thought I'd show them to you. So I don't know how we're going to work the ergonomics here, but we'll come up with a way. Some of these are rebuys. Some of them I got just because they were cheap. So, they may be whims or gambles or second chances from decades ago. That's the thing. When you're out in the sale lot and the books that you're accumulating are $3 a piece, you don't really have to worry all that much about the imperial finances. So the first one I got is an old Ace science fiction mass market paperback. I haven't read this since it first came out. And I wasn't all that wild about it when it did, but I'm going to give it another try. I've been watching a lot of science fiction YouTube, and that gets the juices flowing to see if maybe I should revisit some of this stuff, especially since most of the science fiction YouTube that I've been watching is young people, young men. Stephen E. Andrews notwithstanding. Most of the science fiction channels I've been watching are people who are 50 years younger than I am. So they're finding all of these old science fiction authors and mass market paperbacks and whatnot, and they've never experienced them before. They're trying them out now. And that adds to the urge to give these things a second try. This is by David Drake, who's an author that I like. He's an author of military science fiction. And this is probably his signature book. This is Hammers Slammers, a collection of stories about a group of science fiction military mercenaries called Hammers Slammers. All of the stereotypes are in here. The dewy, impressionable young kid who's going to become bitter and hardened in the course of all of his adventures. The savvy CO, the pasty-faced killing machine who in most really dumb military fiction and military science fiction is simply called Reaper. I've lost track of how many novels think that's a clever thing to do. To have the one guy who's the stone-cold killer of the team, the one who could kill any of them at any time. They don't drop him out of a helicopter, which is what they would do to a full-blown psychotic on the platoon. Instead, they just call him Reaper. But here they don't call him Reaper. What's his name? They might just be called Killer or something like that. But you've got the brainy, totally amoral statistician, all that sort of stuff. You've got all this stereotypical stuff here. And they have stereotypical military adventures. And David Drake is a terrific writer. He really hooks you and keeps you reading. I'm a fan of some of his more thoughtful, a little bit more considered stuff, but I haven't read Hammer Slammers. Let's find out. Pretty sure this is the original paperback. 1979. You know, it's probably been that long. So 40 years since I read Hammer Slammers. I thought it was time I gave it another try, especially since the Brattle gods were gently pushing it in my direction. They were suggesting it, so I'll give it a try. And here's hoping that it doesn't put a yen in me to read all of David Drake, because he wrote a lot of stuff and still is writing, or stopped only recently. Then we have two murder mysteries by the same author, James McClure. I don't know this author. I don't think I know this author, but I love experimenting with murder mysteries. I think about them all the time. We're right on the edge of March Mystery Madness, when I will be talking about them all the time. I read them all year long. I love murder mysteries. I've especially been grappling lately with the mechanics of how to write murder mysteries. I've tried it a couple of times, haven't been happy with the results. And I'd like to try it again. There's a NaNoWriMo spring event coming up. I'd like that to be what I try. A carefully plotted and calculated classical murder mystery. I've been consulting with a murder mystery author. This is not always a useful thing to do. When the murder mystery author in question is talented, oftentimes I've noticed that talented people have a hard time explaining the workings of what they're doing to people who don't have talent, because for them, a large part of that heavy weight is carried by their talent. So never needed to think about it. But I'm not taking these murder mysteries as manuals of what to do. But I am interested in the variations on the theme, and these seem unusual. They star the same duo. The first one is The Blood of an Englishman, and the second one is The Artful Egg. And the duo is a South African cop and his Zulu sergeant. I've never read any of these, I don't think. Let's see the description of Blood of an Englishman. 6 days into their search for a man who put a .32 caliber bullet into a South African antique dealer, neither Kramer of the murder squad nor his Bantu assistant Zondi has a single lead in the case. On the 7th day, Mrs. Digby Smith opens the trunk of her car and discovers the hideous, tied-up corpse of her younger brother. Two violent crimes, seemingly unconnected, but as Kramer and Zondi pursue their investigation, startling connections turn up in the sordid underworld of Treckersburg and the secret, unresolved enmities of World War II. You know the bad guy's going to be a Nazi. You just know that he is. But then this next one is someone out there is crazy. Crazy enough to kill a world-famous novelist and then strew her naked body with flowers and herbs. Or is there method in this madness? That's the question South African Police Lieutenant Tromp Kramer and his Zulu partner, Sergeant Mickey Zondi, must answer in James McClure's most gripping story yet. Most gripping story yet from 1984. So these are from the 80s. I don't remember these at all. I don't think I do. And the Kirkus Review here, they've got a blurb from the Cleveland Plains dealer and also a blurb from P.D. James, who really liked this series. But the Kirkus Review, and I naturally gravitate to the Kirkus Review. It says, still surly, lustful Kramer and shrewd role-playing Zondi remain a distinctive team. The narration is full of cool, dark ironies and vivid South African portraiture. A fine, solid entertainment here. And the Kirkus reviewers are dyspeptic by nature, and they've seen it all. They don't hype things. So I'm curious. I'm curious to know here. Of course, I want to learn all about the setting and the characters and all that sort of thing, but I confess, a part of my mind is going to be wondering about the plotting. How do you go about plotting? So in that first book, for instance, we have two seemingly unconnected crimes. And the author has to know the connection ahead of time, long ahead of time. The author not only has to know the connection between those two seemingly unconnected crimes, but has to figure out how the detectives will determine that connection, how they will find it out. What would be the most likely way? What would be the most dramatically pleasing way? What's the most unlikely way? What would be the way that you would find that out? All of that kind of plotting ahead of time strikes me as just magic, just pure arcana. I have no idea how to do it convincingly, and I want to learn. I want to be able to do it. So those are the mass market paperbacks. Quite a few paperbacks here, but those are the only mass market paperbacks. Then we have a hardcover. Somebody put a dust jacket over this thing, and I've never seen this edition. I've had this book a million times. This is The Shock of Recognition by Edmund Wilson. Lovely edition here, in which he goes through American history, American literary history, sort of torch passing by torch passing. So this is a collection of, it's not a narrative history. I think it says that it wants to be. that it wants to be. This book is intended to be read as a history. I couldn't give two craps in a pan what the book is intended to be read by. I'm talking about what it is. I don't care what the author wants it to be. And it's not a narrative history of American literature. Instead, it's an anthology of the way American writers have responded to each other. So you've got Melville reviewing Hawthorne. You've got Twain reviewing James Fenimore Cooper, and so on and so forth over centuries. It's a fascinating collection. I really, really enjoy it, and I don't have a copy at the moment, so I found this, I grabbed it. Then we have two books about Venice. There was another book about Venice there that looked really, really good, but it was as big as an automobile door and just as heavy. Probably weighed 100 pounds. So I was tempted, but I left it behind. I simply left it behind. I have no place for it here. I would never use it at that size. I couldn't have got it back here, so no, it's going to have to go to somebody else. But I found two books on Venice, one of which is a rebuy. Because the last copy that I got, I sent it to one of you right away. One of you piped up right away and wanted it. And I figured, I got the usual sob story. You people know exactly how to play me. I got the usual sob story about how I love books. I love your channel. You're so sexy. And I live in a book desert. I don't want to go on eBay because they're full of frauds and liars. But I live in a book desert. There are no bookstores anywhere around me. No used bookstores. I will never see a copy of the book you held up. And I really want it. That always works with me. I'm such a softie. That's why I'm forever mailing out books. Because that always works with me. And one of you saw this book and wanted it, so I sent off the copy, and the thought in my mind was, the Brattle will provide. At the Brattle, you see interesting older books, and you don't see just interesting older books, you see them multiple times. Most people don't have that luxury. I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that, no matter how well I'm being played, so I sent it off. And I found it again, in rapid time. This was less than a year. This is by John Freely, and it is Strolling Through Venice. Literature, history. Imagine walking through Venice's neighborhoods with John Freely with you as he just sort of spins stories. That is extremely attractive to me. I think I read this when it first came out in the 1990s. I think I did. But one of you wanted it. You don't have... And I'm not mocking, totally. I'm not completely mocking, because I understand the kind of book desert you're talking about, where you've got maybe a shelf or two of books that are at a Goodwill or a charity shop, and they never change, or they're really bad, and there's nothing else. Just nothing else. It would be horrible to have an itch you can't scratch. So I packaged this up and sent it off. Now I have a copy again. And as a bonus, from you being so kind, the Brattle Gods also gave me this thing, which is Richard Goy's Architectural Guide to Venice. Nice, heavy, handy thing that takes you through all of the buildings in Venice. Oh, something dropped out. I'll be able to reach that. It takes you through all the buildings of Venice and describes exactly what they are. It's got a really stiff binding. It's clearly meant to be used as a sort of walk-around guidebook. I'm never going to see Venice again, and I loved it. When I lived there, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I know a lot about it. I know a lot about the histories and biographies of all of these buildings. But I don't think I've had a copy of this. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I should have a whole shelf of Venice books. I don't. I should, but I don't. Instead, they're scattered everywhere. They should be one big shelf so that I know exactly where they all are, and I could just add these two to it. But no. No, instead, they're everywhere. Then we have a Penguin trade paperback, but not a Penguin classic. This is a Penguin Greenspine modern classic that I really like. I've always liked this edition. Every time I get it, I give it away. Every time I do, I send it out somewhere. So it's not on this Penguin bookcase where it should be. This Penguin bookcase, as you can see, is not just for black spine penguins. There are all sorts of different designs there. And this will go on there. This is Gravity's Rainbow, the rather graceful, lovely edition that Penguin did of Gravity's Rainbow. I don't have a paperback copy. I don't have a copy at all, a physical copy of Gravity's Rainbow at all. I have an ebook of it. But I want this Penguin edition. I never thought to tell myself that the Brattle would provide, but it did. It did. So I now have this, and maybe that occasions a reread. I haven't read Gravity's Rainbow in 10 years, maybe more than that. Who knows what I would find in it? And now that I missed completely the first time, or the time before that, or whatever. Okay, then we have an older book. This is from the 1950s, I believe. This is by Dana Prescott, and it is A Rough Passage: True Tales of Men and Ships. And there is our author. who went to sea at 19, the whole 9 yards, the usual story, and became very interested in all things nautical. And this is a collection of nautical stories that, if I remember correctly, I got this out of a library a long time ago and remember liking it. Never in a million years thought that I would see a copy out in the wild that I could just buy for $3. Never in a million years. But if it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to happen at the Brattle. If I remember correctly, and I do, this author, he in this book, chapter by chapter, he looks at a bunch of famous nautical disasters, famous nautical mysteries, famous ships or sailing episodes of one kind or another. Just about 10 chapters, and the Marie Celeste is in here, of course, one of the most profound nautical mysteries. The Marie Celeste was a ship that was found empty, perfectly shipshape, no problems with the engine, no problems with the hull, no problems with anything. Warm food on the table, warm steaming coffee, beds turned down, everything working, but everyone gone. Captain, crew, everyone gone. So no idea what happened to the Marie Celeste. But there's also a long chapter in here on the Titanic as well, and a bunch of other stuff. And if I remember correctly, the author takes a liberally dramatic hand with telling these stories. They are not just told from the Naval Registry or whatever. They are also dramatized, which is a lot of fun. As long as the author knows what he's doing, that's a lot of fun. Then another Penguin. We just got finished with the Penguin bookcase from my library tour, but I found a Penguin Deluxe, a Classic Deluxe edition that I remember selling in the bookstore, but I didn't get a copy. Haven't seen a copy until now. I objected to it just a bit, but I will definitely take it. This is the Penguin Classic Deluxe edition of the Bronte sisters, with the deckled edges and the French flaps. Just a lovely thing that has 3 portraits there all the way around the side there. And the minor objection that I had to this was the selection. Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre are not tough selections, but then there's a third selection. And here it's Agnes Grey, and I'm not sure that I agree with Agnes Grey. There's another candidate there that I would probably have liked better. But I remember looking through this volume and really liking it. Now I have a perfect condition copy so that I can just, out of courtesy for that earlier disagreement, I will reread Agnes Grey in this edition. And then on the Penguin shelf it goes. And then finally we have this last one, which is fantasy. I love this series. I try to grab it whenever I see it, but I also give it away. People don't seem to be able to find it. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th volume in the series. I'd like to get them all in hardcover. It would be nice. But these are by D.B. Jackson, and this one is A Plunder of Souls. With that great, who is that, McGrath? What's the name of that cover artist? I should know since I love his work. Designed by Heather Saunders, but who drew the cover? Oh, don't tell me you're not going to say. It's a famous artist. Chris McGrath is the artist here. He's done a million fantasy novels. And this is set in colonial era Boston. In fact, I think the end papers are the town of Boston back when it had the neck, when Boston was basically an island in the middle of water. And it was connected to the mainland by the Boston Neck. These are set there in colonial era Boston, but the main character is a conjurer. He's a minor grade sorcerer who is also part of law enforcement. He's a thief taker. And they are wonderful. These volumes are just wonderful. I never hold on to them. So this is not, actually, will this tell me? This is not the first one. The first one is called Thief Taker, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the first one is Thief Taker, then Thieves' Quarry, then A Plunder of Souls. So this is the 3rd book in the series. And I have no idea if it went on after that. But I really enjoy them. I really should make a project of, well, I won't make a project. I will just wait. The Brattle will provide. But that, I thought I'd add a little fantasy here in hardcover. I don't usually do that. And there you go. That was a Brattle haul. Merely because for 12 hours it's going to be a little bit on the chilly side here in Boston. That's how little provocation I need to go to the Brattle. And my only plea of defense is that you wouldn't be any stronger. You would go there all the time too. Don't tell me you wouldn't. So we have A Plunder of Souls, fantasy set in colonial Boston. We have the Penguin Classic Deluxe edition of the Bronte sisters. Not to be confused, of course, with the Penguin Classic Deluxe editions of individual books by the Bronte sisters. This is a big volume. Then we have Rough Passage by Dana Prescott. A very Boston name, but if I remember correctly, he's from elsewhere in New England, not from Boston. Then we have Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon in this big green Penguin trade paperback. So that's 2 for this bookcase alone that'll go in this room. We have 2 books about Venice, kind of anecdotal guidebook and an architectural guide. we have Edmund Wilson's The Shock of Recognition. We'll also go in this room. It'll go in the bookcase directly behind me. There are a bunch of Edmund Wilson volumes there. I just need to rearrange it and make room. We have 2 mysteries by James McClure set in Africa. And finally, we have Hammer Slammers by David Drake in the original mass market paperback there. See, so we start with science fiction, we end with fantasy, but I'm up for it anyway, and we'll see what I make. I know that I like the Thief Taker books. Hammer Slammers, David Drake, when he's at his... I shouldn't even rip into him, because when I think about how cliche a lot of the gimmicks that are in this book are, I realize that he's the one who made them, a lot of them. And that a lot of people, whether they went on to create movies or TV shows or other books, read and loved David Drake to start with. That's where they learned these things and then just endlessly repeated them, copied and pasted them. A nice Brattle haul. Always nice. You can tell a nice Brattle haul by the number of surefire additions to this little book room. They are not rinse and repeat. They are not just stuff going through a cycle and it will end up back at the Brattle when I'm done with it in a year or 2 years or whatever. There are quite a few of these things. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 things in this pile that are coming into this room. That's nice. That's a nice feeling. That makes me feel like I wasn't completely wasting my time just buying stuff to buy stuff. So that was a Brattle trip this morning. Very happy about it. And then you'll be hearing about the cold, of course. If it actually does happen, I will certainly squeak in complaint about it. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.